Good evening. Welcome to the Trinity Channel, ABN. This is C.L. Edwards, your host today, and I believe we have a very good and exciting show for you this evening, God willing. Today we are going to discuss the title and topic, How Islamic Doctrine Underlines Each Action. Now, we can't help if you're tuned in to the news, to the internet, into iTunes, into every type of internet, seeing and hearing stories each and every day about concerning Islam or related to Islam or Islamism or Islamist, or we're hearing stories about migrants and the millions of immigrants that are flooding into Europe and other places, in different incidences that are happening. There are tons of stories about all this stuff. But we're also told by many in the same exact media and other outlets that some of the negative things that we see going on, they have absolutely no connection and have nothing to do with Islam. So the negativity, the jihad, the rape gangs, the various plots to overthrow Western civilization, whatever it is you can think of, all of these things are the acts of extremists. But these extremists who happen to be Muslim and who happen to be carrying their actions out in the name of Islam, some doing it proclaiming that they're doing their actions based on the Quran and the Sunnah in the name of Muhammad and the advancement of Islamic civilization, we are told that has nothing to do with Islam. And it has no connection and nothing to do with the Quran. So we're going to explore that question this evening. And today we have a guest today. We have Dr. Bill Warner, Dr. Bill Warner, PhD, who is a physicist, a author, who has a PhD in physics and mathematics from NC State University from 1968. He has been a university professor, businessman, and an applied physicist. Dr. Bill Warner, he runs a website on political Islam, politicalislam.com. He's authored a number of books, and he's an all-around authority figure on this particular subject. And I believe we have him now on Skype. Can you hear me, Dr. Bill?
I can indeed. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can definitely hear you. Did you get a chance to hear my introduction?
Yes, I did. I'm anxious to meet the man you were talking about.
It's you. Take a look in the mirror.
Oh.
Now, Dr. Bill, like I just said, unless you are completely cut off from the internet and you never go online and you don't watch television and you just stay in the house all day, you don't hear about what's going on in the news every single day. You're not hearing about ISIS. You're not hearing about Boko Haram. You're not hearing about the Islamic Muslim migrants that are flooding into Europe at this time and the various things that are going on related to that. You don't know anything about that, but that's not the majority of people. 90% of people do know about what's going on. They do have connection, and they do go online and they watch and view these news stories. And the majority of the people who are viewing us right now have some type of knowledge of the things that are going on. We are told by the experts, our political experts in the United States of America, that this has no connection to Islam at all. What do we think of a statement like that?
Well, I find it odd that most of the people who say that has nothing to do with Islam, I'll bet you if you gave them a $20 bill, says, I'll give you a $20 bill if you can tell me in one sentence what Islam is, they wouldn't be able to tell you. They would say, oh, it's the religion of Muslims or something like that. But Islam has a precise doctrine, and it's very easy to understand. It's been made easy to understand. That's the purpose of my writing, actually, is to make the Islamic doctrine easy. But what I find is just the opposite from what the media finds. I find that Islamic doctrine drives everything that Muslims do. And so, I thought it would be interesting to do a show based on this. Just, I gave you, CL, a whole bunch of little news clips and stuff.
Yes, you did.
And I thought it would be interesting to go over these and to point out how this shows the doctrine of Islam. You were just mentioning the migration. Immigration is a pure Islamic concept in the sense of most immigrants that come across from Mexico into America are coming because of economics. But a Muslim has many reasons to migrate. One of them being to Islamicize, that is, the act of migration itself is an act of jihad. So the Hijrah, which marks the beginning of Islam's calendar, isn't this interesting, CL?
Yes.
If you were going to say Islam has a calendar, you'd figure, well, it would start with the birth of Muhammad, or it would start with the revelation of the Quran. No. The calendar of Islam begins with Muhammad's migration, the Hijrah, from Mecca to Medina. So if the Muslims thought that his migration was so important that they based their calendar on it, and then they go further to say that Muhammad is the perfect man. There's over 90 verses in the Quran which state that Muhammad is the perfect man, the perfect human being. I call him the divine human prototype. That is, every Muslim is supposed to eat like Muhammad, make love like Muhammad, speak like Muhammad, practice jihad like Muhammad. So therefore, if Muhammad migrated for the purpose of Islamicizing Medina, then why aren't the migrants of today who are Muslims also have some of that in their mind as well?
Interesting points, very interesting. And also, wouldn't we say that the first migration of Muhammad and his companions from Mecca to Medina, that instituted political Islam into the world?
Yes. Most important. Most important. As a matter of fact, that could be the most important thing that will be said tonight, because Muhammad preached the religion of Islam for 13 years in Mecca and persuaded only 150 Arabs to become Muslims. That's about 10 a year. Well, if it had not been for the migration, and he kept up at his rate of 10 a year, when he died, there'd have been fewer than 1,000 Muslims left alive, and we wouldn't have any Islam. So it marked the beginning of political Islam, because Muhammad became a politician in Medina.
So basically, I could maybe draw from that, if we were to follow Islam as a religion of peace, a religion that calls for peace among humanity, tolerance among religions, some of the message that we heard that was preached by Muhammad in Mecca, if we were just to stick with that, we wouldn't have 2 billion Muslims on the earth at this moment in time. It's not until later on, when the message expands and includes political Islam in Medina, that we get Islam of today and the Islam of the previous 1,400 years.
Right. Because when he died, every Arab in the Hijaz, which was classical Arabia, was a Muslim. So his political jihad, his politics and jihad made him the first ruler of all of Arabia. And so it brought him his success. So it was political Islam that brought him the success. Now, the thing to contrast here is we're illustrating a very important point, which I call dualism.
Okay.
Because Islam, excuse me, Islam has 2 answers to every question, a good one and a not so good one. So is Islam the religion of peace? Well, yes, to some degree in Mecca. There was no blood spilled except in one fist fight. Now, we could say that it was a religion of crankiness because they had a lot of debates and arguments, but no one was being harmed. But later, in Medina, he averaged an event of jihad every 6 weeks for the last 9 years of his life. Think about that. For nearly a decade, every 6 weeks, there was another jihad of some sort. And that's what made him successful. So is Islam the religion of peace? Well, yes. But is it the politics of jihad? Yes, too. And of course, what most people want to do at this point, they want to go, if you're trained in Western logic, you go, wait a minute, those 2 things contradict each other. One of them is right and the other one is wrong. But dualism says, no, both of them are right at the same time, even though they contradict each other. And people have a little, in the West, have a little trouble getting their head around that because they go, well, no, I mean, Bill, which one's the real one? The answer is yes.
Wow. Wow. Just a note, I saw a post that was posted on your Facebook page earlier today. It was a graph for QuranAtAglance.com. And it basically had the Quran at a glance. It made some claims about there being 4 different main topics of the Quran. And I took a look at this graph, and I looked at the Medina verses, surahs, the later surahs that abrogated the surahs that were revealed in Mecca, and the mathematically analyzed the large amount of verses dealing with the topic of jihad. And this is an opinion. It's not like the opinion of some person you can say is an Islamophobe. And it's not even information that comes from the Hadith or the commentaries on the Quran. This is directly out of the Quran itself, analyzed mathematically, that it's an actual fact that the Medinan verses in surahs are largely about the topic of jihad.
Correct. Exactly correct.
Wow. Wow.
See, this gives Islam such a great power. It's like they've got a sink with hot water and cold water. If you want cold water, well, you have your religion and I have mine, that there be no compulsion in religion. Well, that sounds like the First Amendment, really, doesn't it? So Islam must be the most tolerant religion in the world. But what about that latter part? No, cut off their fingertips, chop off their heads, make them pay the jizya. Ooh, I don't want to live under that, CL.
I don't want to live under that either. It doesn't sound very appealing.
Well, we know from the Middle East that Christians are experiencing that form of Islam, and it is a horror show.
But we were told that what's going on in the Middle East right now with ISIS, even in Africa with Boko Haram and various different groups around the world, that those guys are just crazy extremists, and they have no connection to Islam or the Quran.
Well, I think you and I would agree that that is completely wrong. And I want to address the term you've used here. They're extremist. If you follow who is the measure of Islam? Muhammad is the measure of Islam. The Quran is the measure of Islam. So if you're doing just what Muhammad did, CL, would that be extreme or would that be normal?
That would be the Sunnah.
Yes,
No,
but I mean, it would be the normal. I mean, if you're following the Sunnah, if you're following exactly what Muhammad said and did, how could that be extreme? That would be normative Islam.
Yes.
You follow me?
Yes.
So, therefore, these people are not extremists. Now, the reason they say they're extremists is they're raping women, they're enslaving women, they're killing people, they're crucifying, they're torturing to death. Now, we call that extreme. But rape of kafir women, non-Muslim women, is not extreme because it is enjoined by the Quran and by the Sunnah. So if a Muslim is raping a Christian woman in Syria right now, he's not being an extremist. He's merely following the doctrine of Islam.
Wow. Wow.
Now, we think it's extreme. As a matter of fact, I think it's pathological. I'll go beyond extreme, but not to the measure of Islam. Not to the measure of Islam.
Wow.
And by the way, everyone's heard of Islamic State, of course. I say everybody. I think that most people have heard of ISIS or Islamic State.
Yes.
Have you ever looked at their literature and videos they put out?
Yes, I have seen some of their literature and some of their videos.
And a lot of their literature is nothing in the world but a written sermon on the Sunnah of Muhammad and the Quran. I remember reading one on assassination, and they pointed out that Muhammad ordered assassinations. So therefore, what happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when a Muslim jihadi in Chattanooga killed 5 service members, that wasn't extreme. That was simply normative behavior, because Muhammad repeatedly ordered people assassinated. So we might think that he was being crazy, but it's just another day in Islam land.
Well, I brung up the topic of the Quran at a glance because for the last 2 days in the ABN studios, there have been debates going on between Shabir Ali and David Wood.
I
And
like David.
I don't know if you got a chance to see any of those, but Shabir Ali, when he was confronted with things that Muhammad had done in his biography, things that
Sarah?
took, yeah, and in the Sirah, and things that took place that are recorded in Hadith, he said that Hadith and biographies and commentaries were not divine revelation. Only the Quran is divine revelation. And so he rejected the Hadith and he rejected the biographies concerning Muhammad, and he just wanted to go by the Quran only.
He cannot reject the Hadith, because if he rejects the Hadith, he will not know how to pray. He will not know how to even say the Shahada. He won't know how to do fasting. He won't know how to do the Hajj. And he won't know how to, left one out, pay the zakat. Because all of those 5 pillars of Islam are not found in the Quran. There's references to them, but if you read the Quran, you'll pray 3 times a day. If you follow the Sunnah, you'll pray 5 times a day. But more than that, you'll know exactly when to pray, how close you sit to your further Muslims, how to follow the Imam, how to choose the Imam. All of that comes from the Sunnah. None of it is found in the Quran. So this gentleman Ali is blowing smoke.
Is that a technical term?
He's jerking you around, dude. He's fooling you. He's lying. What can I be more clear?
Yes, be as clear as you like. Let me address one of the stories, the first story from the list that you sent me. Now, we have a story that appears in the dailymail.co.uk. And let me read just a title from this so people can get an idea. Germany in a state of siege. Merkel was cheered when she opened the floodgates to migrants. Now, with gangs of men roaming the streets and young German women being told to cover up, the mood is changing. The mood is changing. We see now all types of waves of crime flooding into Germany. We see that people are calling for crosses to be removed from churches. And we're seeing that people are demanding that women, even non-Muslim women, cover up with hijab, jilbab, and other Islamic style coverings in the name of being more, what's the word I'm looking for? More gracious and more, you know where I'm coming from. But
right.
We're told, the women are told to cover up. Does this story we see in the Daily Mail have any connection to Islam at all?
Well, does the Sharia have any connection to Islam?
Well, I would think
so.
Does
the Kafir have any? What is happening here is that Germany is being extraordinarily naive. Now, one of the people who's being extraordinarily naive is Merkel. And here's what's odd. Merkel is a very intelligent woman. She holds a doctorate in chemistry. You do not get a doctorate in chemistry and be stupid. But what she's showing us is that you can have a very high IQ, but if you don't have any knowledge, that doesn't mean that you're doing what's practical and what's called for. So Merkel demonstrates that she has no understanding about Islam at all. But she thinks because she's smart and liberal that that's all that's needed. Now, by the way, Merkel here is exactly like, I would say, most of the Christian leaders that here in Nashville, Tennessee, and most of the leftists that I know. They're intelligent people, but they don't have any knowledge of Islam, and so therefore they make up this beautiful, warm and fuzzy Islam. But let's take these things. What's happening here is that in the Sharia, the kafir, the non-Muslim, I love the word kafir instead of infidel because that's the Arabic word, and I don't think it really translates very well. So I like it to use the original. The kafir must submit to the Sharia. The kafir civilization must start to collapse. Now, these are just the first demands these people will make. They'll make more and more demands. For instance, I can predict it. Here's one of the demands they'll make: that in the towns they occupy, that the churches stop ringing their bells. Now, how can I predict that? Do I foresee the future? No, I know the Sunnah. And Muhammad said, bells are the sound of Satan. So, therefore, since that is the Sunnah and it is part of the Sharia, that means that these demands will be met. Now, the other thing that will happen is that crime will go on the increase. Why? Because crime against the kafir for the purpose of subjugating him is an act of individual jihad. So what we see as lawlessness, I see as following the Sharia. So this is a big shift in understanding, and it's the understanding that's missing in our media, because our media is composed of people, at least in America, who are left of center. They don't know anything about Islam other than they met a nice Muslim, and so therefore Islam is nice. But what we're seeing here is several things are happening. My wife, who is an internet researcher, was telling me that there are now pictures on the web of how the Muslims are now storming into the interstates, except they call them the Autobahn. They're stopping traffic, and when the trucks stop, they open the trucks and start pulling things out and stealing them. Now, here's several things are happening. Number one, the Germans, unless they're on the internet, will not know of this. Because what's happening is that Merkel is beginning to censor any reference to Islam which is not favorable. As a matter of fact, I saw a picture which scared the fool out of me. Merkel was at a dinner with Mark Zuckerberg, who owns Facebook. And what she's telling him to do, I want you to use your power of running Facebook to make sure that there's no hate speech and xenophobia. We need to examine both of those, because what is hate speech? Well, hate speech is something that a Muslim doesn't like, pure and simple. And what's xenophobia? Not liking migrants, Islamic migrants coming into your country to take over your civilization. She wants him to start exercising the fascist ability to suppress information in the news. That is, there's no constitutional right for freedom of press or freedom of speech in Germany. So we're seeing a whole lot of things happen. Number one, evil is walking the land, and it can't be talked about, because then notice what those things say, CL. It doesn't say you're wrong, it says you are immoral. You're a bigot, you're a hater. And next will come out the word Islamophobe. So there are many things happening in Germany, but the increase in crime, and there will be increased rapes. Can I predict to you what will happen about the rapes by Muslims? Once it's noted that there's a big increase in the number of rapes by Muslims, you know what the law will do? They will make it a law, as they have in Sweden, that if you're raped, you cannot give the policeman any information which would imply that he's a Muslim, or an Arab, or a foreigner. Therefore, bingo, no more Islamic rape.
I don't laugh because it's funny. I laugh because of how ridiculous it sounds.
But I mean, CL, you've been hanging around this game long enough to know to me that ridiculous is something we go beyond every day when you study Islam.
And
But you see here, Germany is being now submitted to the dhimmi status. Have we talked about the dhimmi yet? D-H-I-M-M-I?
we didn't quite bring that up yet. But
Well,
tell us,
they're now
what is
being
the
introduced to the dhimmi status, which is the Christian can go to church and worship, or not worship, whatever you want to do. The Jew can go to the synagogue, but outside of the church, outside of the synagogue, it is all Islam. And the laws of Germany, the laws of Hungary, the laws of Europe will slowly be eroded more and more until finally it will simply be, well, what are you going to do?
Wow.
They already in Germany have, the police don't usually arrest Muslims when they do crimes because they can't arrest them all, so they give them a talking to. You know, that's really not the right thing to do.
That sounds like civilizational suicide.
Collapse,
Why would anybody
suicide.
do that to their own country?
Well, have we not experienced here in America the increase in lawlessness? We're supposed to have a constitution which tells us what the president is limited to. But if the nation doesn't enforce the laws, then they become scoff laws. It's like, yeah, you're not supposed to jaywalk, but everybody does it. And so we are seeing that in America, where Obama has done many things which are like, you can't do that. He does them anyway, and he makes them stick because no one will oppose him. And that's what Germany will see, an increase in Sharia law, and they'll finally be demands for Sharia courts, by the way. But there's a whole lot of insanity lurked in all this. I'm going to change my thing from dhimmi, that is submitting to the rule of the Sharia even though you're not a Muslim, to another point about this immigration. How come we don't see anybody talking about how young these people are? These are fighting age men. Now what will happen is they will either marry German women and have Muslim babies, or they will say to Germany, you know, my mother's not here, my father's not here, my cousin's not here, my brothers aren't here, so we need to bring my family with me to Germany so that I will feel comfortable. You know what the Germans will say? Oh yes, let's bring them all. Idiot compassion.
This is good stuff, but we want to continue, but we're going to take a break real quick. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We are going to be right back after this break.
Coming soon, the 5th International Apologetics Week, starting November 9th, 2015. We'll broadcast through internet, satellites, and through antenna network televisions. 3 shows per day, over 40 world-renowned apologists. Titles of the shows: The Deity of Christ, Biblical Doctrine, World Religions and Heresies, Science and Creation, Politics, Atheism, Islam, and more. 5th International Apologetics Week, starting November 9th. 3 shows per day. Where? TrinityChannel.com. Click and watch live. For more information, call the numbers on the screen.
ABN and Trinity Channel invites you to watch a special live debate. Ijazi Ahmed versus Dr. Tony Costa. The topic will be,
Was Jesus the Son of God or only the Prophet of God?
the debate will be held October 9th, 2015, 7 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. Greenwich, and 9 a.m. Australian. Watch us live on ABN and Trinity Channel, or visit our websites trinitychannel.com and abnsat.com. Or for more information, call us at one of the numbers on your screen.
ABN viewers, to watch free reruns of our marathon shows, apologetic shows, and English programs, go to www.youtube.com and type Trinity Channel. Here at ABN, we make it easier for viewers like you to watch programs. For more information, call us at 248-416-1300.
Watch ABN on your TV. With the Chromecast stick, you can simply connect your phone to the television to watch shows. Download the ABN Sat app and click on the Chromecast button. Need help installing? Contact us at 248-416-1300.
Good afternoon, and we are back. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching a live show here on the Trinity Channel. I am C.L. Edwards, and we have today our guest, Dr. Bill Warner. And the topic of today, again, is how Islamic doctrine underlines each action. And this is something we've been discussing so far. If you're just tuning in, or if you've been watching during the whole show, we've been discussing the topic of Sharia law being implemented in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. We've been talking about dimnitude, the subjugation of the kafir, the unbeliever, to Sharia law. And we've been talking about hijrah, the Islamic migration, or the doctrine of Islamic migration, first originated by Muhammad and his companions when they left from Mecca to Medina to establish political Islam in the beginning of Islam, which we see throughout the 1400 years of Islam and even today. Now, we have been talking about this subject here, Dr. Bill, and we just got done talking about why would people who are left of center or more liberal would commit civilizational suicide. We've gone through some of the things that you predict will happen, because we know these things will happen because we see them in the Quran and the Sunnah. Let me ask you a specific question. Now, regarding the cross, one of the things that we are hearing about in the media and alternative media is the offensiveness of the cross to some Islamists, the demanding that the cross be removed. And we're seeing reports of IS, Islamic State, and other organizations in the Middle East and Africa literally tearing down the crosses from the church. What's so offensive about a cross? What's the big deal about a cross that would invoke such anger and action?
Well, it's not the cross itself. What it is what it represents, which is Christianity. Islam sees itself as having to fulfill its destiny of dominating the world, all the world. And yet, what is the world's largest religion? Well, Christianity.
Yes.
So that means that its biggest competitor is Christianity. Now, the relationship between the Muslim and the Kafir can be many things, but one of them is they're never friendly. Never a true friend. They can be friendly in appearance, but not a true friend. So what we have here is Islam, excuse me, Islam is attacking the symbol of its hated rival, the chief, we can call Christianity the chief kafir. Now, CL, we have to stop right here and say any Muslim right now would be bouncing up and down saying, oh, no, 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 Christians are people of the book. We're all members of the family of Abraham. We love Christians. Remember I started off this talk about dualism, how Islam has two answers to every question?
Yes.
Well, I'm talking to you about dualism because there are verses in the Quran in which Christians are spoken of well. There's one verse which even says, you know, the Christians are so much better than the Jews. So here we have one part of Islamic doctrine saying, oh, we love Muslims. We're members of the family of Abraham. We're almost the same, except, of course, we Muslims are better because the Christian New Testament, the Injil, the Gospel is, well, it's corrupt. And their idea of Jesus, well, that's completely wrong. And the Jews, well, their Torah is corrupt. And the story of Moses, no, they got that wrong too. The story of Abraham, they got that wrong. But we love them anyway. But we always have another doctrine here, which is they must be completely subjugated. And so this is what we see the two faces of Islam. Now here in America, if we brought out some Muslim to sit at your desk and talk to him, would he tell us about how much the Christians have to become dhimmis and be submitted to Sharia law, that their women can be raped, that they are supposed to be third-class citizens? No, he wouldn't tell us that at all. He would tell us those lovey-dovey Christian, we love the Christian verses. So, but in the end, the biggest enemy, the biggest kafir, the strongest kafir, the chief kafir is the Christian. And the Christians must be destroyed, not only in place, but in person, but also with its symbols. Islam is very keen on symbols and their importance. So the cross is the symbol of their greatest enemy, their most hated enemy, the Christian. And by the way, here's an example that illustrates two things about Christians. At Georgetown University, which originally was a Catholic university started by the Jesuits, who used to be people who could reason quite well, when the Muslims got there, they said, you gave a talk, they said, oh, no, you got to cover the crosses. I mean, they talk like that they're, what is the vampire can't take the light of day or something, it'll wither up and blow away. And so they're like the werewolf or the vampire. No, we can't stand the sight of the cross. Oh, it's the vampire that can't stand the cross. That's right. Oh, no, we're like vampires. We can't stand the cross. Do you know what the university at Georgetown did? They covered up all the crosses in order not to offend the Muslim. Now, what did they do? They submitted to the Sharia. They became dhimmis in action. And do you know what? They were proud of it because now then they made their loving Muslim brother friends very happy. But of course, the next time the Muslims come back, they'll have another demand. It'll be a little further. Until finally, in the end, well, look in the Middle East. Turkey was originally 100% Christian. Now it's 0.3% Christian. Why? Because of a notch at a time was taken away from them. And Georgetown took the first step, and they were so happy about it.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. What would I just can't fathom in my mind what would motivate a Christian organization to cover up the cross because someone said that they were offended by it. That's mind blowing.
You know what I'd have told him? Go find another room, buddy.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. On the topic earlier, you were talking about causing people not to be able to speak against Islam, censoring any criticism of Islam. We see this in the Quran and the Sunnah itself. I would just like to point out to the audience real quickly a narration from back in the time of when Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. Well, at the time when he did this, there happened to be a poetess named Asma. She belonged to the tribe of Medinian pagans. And her husband, his name was Yazid ibn Zayd. She composed a poem blaming the Medinian pagans for obeying a stranger, Muhammad, and for not taking the initiative to attack him by surprise. When the prophet heard what she had said, he asked, "Who will rid me of Marwan's daughter?" And a member of her husband's tribe volunteered, crept into her house during the night with her while she was sleeping with her 5 children, the youngest sleeping on her breast, and he assassinated her. He gently removed the children from her and off of her breast, and then they assassinated her, a poetess. So we see this as a narration from Islamic sources regarding Muhammad himself. So this attitude of no one can ever say anything about Muhammad, not that we want to mock Muhammad at all, but when we see people drawing pictures of Muhammad, saying things that could be perceived as offensive about Muhammad, we see we see actual violence taking place. This all goes back to the Quran and Sunnah. This all goes back 1,400 years ago.
Correct. And remember here, this is not the only poet that Muhammad had killed.
No.
Asma Marwan was the first. After that came Ka'b bin Ashraf. And why were they killed? Because they wrote a poem that satirized Muhammad. Now, let me tell you something. I grew up in the rural South. And one of the marks that marked the division between a boy and a man was you learned sitting on the store porch, which was our social center. There were 2 general stores in the little town I grew up in, 2 stores and 2 churches, and 2-room grade school. We found out that, where I got on my sidebar there, one of the things in becoming a man was you had to be able to take a joke. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
Because you had to be able to take a joke. People can make fun of you, and you had to laugh too, and maybe throw a joke back at them. And the mark of a true friend was you could trade insults. This is the culture that I come from. So we considered a sense of humor to be a social lubricant and a way to deal with things that were difficult. Now this has served me well in my life, because now then if you insult me, and by the way, I get my fair share of insults doing what I do, it's like water off a duck's back. Doesn't mean anything to me. But here's Muhammad, the perfect human being. The man can't take a joke. Do you see here, this is not the mark of, if you can't take a joke, you're not emotionally well balanced, is the point I'm making. And this isn't the only time he had people assassinated, because when he invaded Mecca to take it over, he issued death warrants for 5 sets of people: an apostate, some dancing girls, and there were 3 of them, and then a poet as well. So once again, and there was another one, I forget what the other reason, he had death warrant issued for him. So why? Because of a skit, a little dancing skit with the dancing girls. So here we have a man who could take absolutely no criticism, none. I come back to this again. CL, if you find there's somebody in your life and they cannot take any criticism, I'm going to bet you don't have a long-term relation with them.
No, I'm not going to be around that person much longer.
Me either. Because, look, I get my fair share of criticism. And even if it's false, in the sense of it's not useful to me, I check it out. One of the ways that we become better as human beings is that we get criticized. I mean, goodness gracious, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. Let me assure you, there was a fair share of criticism that came down to me. All of it needed and necessary, I might add. So when you have a man who can't take a joke, what do you have when everyone tries to be like Muhammad? You get 1.5 billion people who can't take a joke.
Yes.
And are willing to kill you because you draw a sketch of Muhammad. By the way, did you ever see the cartoon that won in Garland, Texas? It didn't even include the word Muhammad on it. There was a picture, and it just said, Muhammad says, the figure who is unnamed says, you can't draw me. And the other side, which showed a set of hands, said, that's the reason I must. So here we have a cartoon which doesn't even mention the man's name, and they're killing people over it. This is not well balanced, nor is it healthy. What it turns out is Muhammad did not play well with others.
Before we move on, I would like to raise up also one of the individuals he killed in Medina was Uqba, who mocked him in Mecca. Originally, he mocked Muhammad in Mecca.
That's right.
And for years, Muhammad held on to that for years until he got to Medina. And when he got to Medina and was able to exercise military and political power, he had him executed. While the man screamed out, "What will happen to my children?" Muhammad replied, "Your children will go to hell."
Exactly. They will join you in hell. I had forgotten about that, CL, but you're exactly correct. And once again, we have here, see, it's not we're talking about Muhammad here. We're talking about the character of Islam.
Yes.
And so the character of Islam is you can't tell a joke. The character of Islam is, I will never, ever forget the smallest slight. I was taught, and I bet you were too as a Christian, that forgiveness is the essence of being a good human being.
Yes.
Were
By
you
Jesus
not?
Christ himself.
Were you not?
Yes.
And yet here's Muhammad who couldn't ever forget. You know, one of the things that comes about this is if you grit your teeth and hold on to such things and never let go of them, I don't see how you can lead a happy life this way. I mean, it's just like you can't turn it loose.
No, I don't think Muhammad could have been much of a happy person, except maybe when he took joy in other aspects of his life, maybe the 9 wives or other things that were going on. But
I wrote an article one time on the humor of Muhammad. It was it was years ago. And one of the things I pointed out, if you go through the Sirah and the Hadith and you extract everything that deals with laugh or smile, you'll discover that he laughed so hard you could see his back teeth when the heads of one of his enemies was thrown at his feet. Wow. There's a sense of humor.
That's not the type of sense of humor I think that we want in our world, in our time.
Let me tell you something, CL. If I found that you thought that was really funny, I wouldn't be having any long-term relations with you.
If you're a stable person, I hope not.
Right.
But I pointed that out to show that after the migration of Muhammad, after the time of quote-unquote peaceful Islam in Mecca, then in Medina, when we have political control and military might and jihad being put into effect, we see a man being punished with his head being chopped off all the way back for a crime, supposed crime, that he committed all the way back in Medina. So isn't that the protocol, the principles laid down for the implementation of Islam today, now?
Oh, yeah. So we're not discussing a human being here. We're discussing the character of 1.5 billion Muslims.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
If it were just Muhammad, look, if it were just Muhammad, I wouldn't be here doing this show with you. CL, I've got other things I could be doing. The problem is that the character of Muhammad is the character of Islam. So never forgetting a slight, never forgetting an insult, and killing those that you disagree with, or what could be characterized as just political differences. This is the character of Islam.
Yes, indeed. This is the Sharia.
This is the Sharia.
I wanted to move on to another story that we can discuss and look at and see if this has any connection to Islam. And I think this is pretty good in light of what we were just talking about. We have another headline in the news. A Muslim woman reads the Quran and leaves Islam. And this particular woman, who was a Somali woman, she says, quote, "It's about hating and killing those who disagree with Islam. It's about conquering Muhammad. He was immoral. He was a bloodthirsty man. He was terrible. And Muslims can read that in his biography. What he did to the Jews, how he raped women, how he killed people. I mean, he killed everyone who didn't agree with him." And this is from a Mona Walter, a Somali woman who migrated out of Africa into Europe, and she actually sat down and read the Quran for herself, a Muslim woman. She read the Quran for herself, and these were the conclusions that she came to. What do you think about that?
I think it's extraordinarily important what you've brought up. And for the listening audience, I gave CL a whole lot of topics he could choose from. And by the way, CL, you can bring up anything you want to read in the news or want to talk about it. But the reason I think this is overwhelmingly important is this. I met recently a Kurd who was a Muslim, and the reason that he stopped being a Muslim was he read the Quran from cover to cover. Now, he left Islam. He became an apostate. I have a book on my shelf called Leaving Islam by Ibn Warwick, and in it he has all these stories of men and women who left Islam. They all left Islam for the same reason. One, they read the Quran and saw who Allah was, or two, they met who Muhammad was. Now, the reason this is important, because we're dealing here on the Trinity channel, if you want to try to convert a Muslim, I recommend that you don't try to convert him from Islam to Christianity. Nope, you make it a two-step process. You first convert him from being a Muslim to a kafir. That is, a Pakistani Christian told me this. Because when you start talking about converting Muslims, or you start talking about Muslims around Christians, they'll say, well, no, we have to love them. We have to love our enemies. Here's what this man said. Listen carefully. If you love a Muslim, take away his Quran. If you love a Muslim, take away his Muhammad. I didn't mean run them and grab the book out of their hand. What he meant was take it away from them by showing in full what is in there, because then he will reject it. So in order to convert a Muslim to Jesus, you first need to convert him to being an apostate of Islam. Then, because a lot of Christians who try evangelical work with Muslims don't understand that when they quote from the New Testament, the Muslim is already like, that New Testament thing, that's the Injil, it's corrupt. When they try to tell stories from the Old Testament, like, the Torah is corrupt. So they're trying to give the man water from a well that's been poisoned. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
But when you take away the Quran from them, then they no longer have the belief that the Injil, the Gospels, is corrupt. Because by taking his Quran away from him, you took that argument away from him. I travel to Europe twice a year to deal with, I have a group in Central Europe that deals with Islam. And a man came to, the first time I was in Europe, a year and a half ago, and he was an apostate from Islam, and he preaches the gospel in northern Iraq. He bought some of my books and listened to my lectures. He came back a year later, and in Prague, he said, I want to tell you that I have converted 200 Muslims to Islam, to Christianity, by using your method. What I do to them is I say, here's what Islamic State has done. Do you like that? No, we hate that. Well, do you understand that that's exactly what's in the Quran? Do you understand that's exactly what's in the Sunnah, that this is the act of Muhammad? No. Yes, here it is. Read it for yourself. Well, that's terrible. Why would you want a religion that is this way? He's converted 200 Muslims to Christianity by first using Muhammad and using the Quran to take their Islam away from them so that he can then And this was in Mosul, and I've since wondered what has happened to those people, because the Christians that are in Mosul are being treated so dreadfully. But anyway, the point I'm making here is that I think that this story is a very important story. And by the way, the way you take the Quran away from the Muslim and you take the Sunnah away from the Muslim is you do not criticize Muhammad. You just show what he did. He had a woman killed for writing a poem. So you take the Quran away by giving them all of the Quran. Does that sound contradictory? Therefore, they reject it themselves. If you expose them to all of Muhammad, they will reject Muhammad. And by the way, the reason I met this Kurdish man was that he said that after he learned that he did not want to be a Muslim anymore, he was on YouTube and found my YouTube channel. Probably should have found yours, but he found mine. And he said, I was set up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching how you talked about Islam, and it was so logical. So here is the way in which we have a person who found out what Islam really was, because CL, you must have talked with Muslims and found out they don't know much at all about Islam. I'm talking about it other than how to pray, do the 5 pillars.
Yes.
So when you expose all of Islam to them, they're like, I don't think I want that.
Well, that's in this particular article about Mona Walters, the lady that was spoken about. This is exactly what she says in the article when she's interviewed. She says that while living in Somalia, she didn't know much about Islam. She was just Muslim. It wasn't until she moved to Sweden and she started going to the mosque on a regular basis that she actually sat down and started reading the Quran. And when she read the Quran, she was completely shocked about the things inside of it that she had never seen before the whole time she was living in an Islamic country.
She makes my point.
Exactly.
Now, by the way, here's the difficulty of doing this. And this is one reason that this technique is not used more. Christians who want to interact with Muslims, many of them are too lazy or too afraid to learn who Muhammad is for themselves. Because to use this method, you have to know Muhammad and you have to know Quran. So I find that a lot of Christians are too lazy and don't want to do this work. And they're willing to believe whatever a Muslim said Islam is. You know, there's something subtle going on here we need to point out. You do not find about Islam from a Muslim. Well, you do, but you want the Muslims to be Muhammad and Allah. So this thing that you must have met, I know you've had this happen. Somebody says, well, I met this Muslim, he was really a nice guy, so therefore Islam is nice. Well, you've met half of Islam, but you must meet all of Islam yourself, and you won't find it in the media, you won't find it in the schools, you won't find it, unfortunately, in many churches. I'm telling you that here in Nashville, Tennessee, the church that knows much about Islam at all almost doesn't exist, which is the reason I love the ABN Trinity channel, is that I can talk to people such as yourself about Islam, and the other thing is we can talk about it.
Yes.
I've been in churches in which they don't want you talking about anything about Islam. No, 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 we don't deal with that. So knowledge is the answer, CL.
Yes, knowledge is the answer. Apologetics, the Christian science of defending the faith and opposing intellectually, giving an answer to other ideologies that oppose Christianity. That's the answer. But that's something that exists in our tradition and has always existed in our tradition for the last 2,000 years. But for some reason, now in our time period, Christians are not familiar with it the way they should be.
Things are not right, CL.
No, they are not. No, they are not. And I would like to, just for the audience and for you, point out one more thing about this particular young lady. She fascinates me. Mona Walters, the young lady who was a Somali woman who left Somalia, moved to Europe, read the Quran, saw the Quran for herself. When she read the Quran for herself, she left Islam. Now she says in the article, a family member encouraged her to read the Bible. And when she read the Bible, she came to Matthew 5:44. And she read, quote, from Jesus himself, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And she said she immediately recognized the difference between Christianity and Islam.
Could it be more different?
Vastly different. That's a completely different message.
Now, CL,
Completely different.
Here's what drives me crazy. Nashville, Tennessee, which says it's a religious town, is filled with Christians who do not know that the difference which this woman has found out for herself. And they believe that, oh, well, Muslims are just like us. What could be less like Islam than that verse?
Well, we just narrated two narrations from the autobiography of Muhammad himself, from the hadith themselves, from Islamic sources themselves, of Muhammad not forgiving his enemies.
Ever.
At all.
Ever.
No.
Until you converted. Now, we do have to add in here, if you would convert, he would then say, okay, you're all right now. You've submitted to me. So now then, only then could you be forgiven after you submitted to him. But he had to be the top dog.
Well, of course, we see in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, which I've quoted every single day that I've been here at ABN, but no, they can have no faith until they make you, O Muhammad, the judge in all of their disputes, and they find within themselves no objection to your rules, and they see themselves as submitted. This is in the Quran.
Correct. You must submit completely to Muhammad in everything, in the smallest detail in your life. The food you eat, how you knock on a door, how you say hello, how you say goodbye, how you have sex, what marriage is, what a will is, how you pray. Everything has to be. The new man in Islam is not so much one who's had darkness taken away, but one who has assumed that role of being a slave.
You are right. To be a good Muslim, to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, you have to pattern your whole entire life, supposedly, after Muhammad and his companions. God only knows if Muhammad himself even did all the things that are recorded in the Sunnah.
That's another whole story. I don't believe he did, but I accept it as true just so we can carry on.
Well, now, people, this has been a great show. We don't want to break things up, but we have to take a break right now. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to continue with the topic of how Islamic doctrine underlines all the action we see of Islamists today. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
ABN and Trinity Channel invites you to watch a special live debate. Ijazi Ahmed versus Dr. Tony Costa. The topic will be,
was Jesus the Son of God or only the prophet of God?
The debate will be held October 9th, 2015, 7 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. Greenwich, and 9 a.m. Australian. Watch us live on ABN and Trinity Channel, or visit our websites trinitychannel.com and abnsat.com. Or for more information, call us at one of the numbers on your screen.
Coming soon, the 5th International Apologetics Week, starting November 9th, 2015. We'll broadcast through internet, satellites, and through antenna network televisions. 3 shows per day, over 40 world-renowned apologists. Titles of the shows: The Deity of Christ, Biblical Doctrine, World Religions and Heresies, Science and Creation, Politics, Atheism, Islam, and more. 5th International Apologetics Week, starting November 9th. 3 shows per day. Where? trinitychannel.com. Click and watch live. For more information, call the numbers on the screen.
Do you have a Samsung Smart TV? Would you like to watch the Trinity Channel on your Samsung Smart TV device? We'd like to share with you an easy way to set up the Trinity Channel and view it on any Samsung Smart TV. If you set the home page on your browser to this address shown on the screen, The Trinity channel will broadcast live upon entering the browser. It takes about 5 seconds to load the website once entering the browser. If you have any questions about setting up the Trinity channel on your Samsung Smart TV device, please give ABN a call at 248-416-1300 and we'll be happy to help you.
Welcome back this evening to our show. I am C.L. Edwards, and you are tuning in and watching the Trinity Channel. Today we have as our guest Dr. Bill Warner, Ph.D., and we're discussing the topic, How Islamic Doctrine Underlines Each Action. We have been discussing for over an hour at this point now, various news stories, various happenings in the world surrounding Islam and Islamism, and how these point back and underline are attached to the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sharia itself. Another topic, Dr. Bill, that I know you have to be familiar with is Dr. Ben Carson. Yes, we can't let the show go past without bringing up Dr. Ben Carson. I think everyone watching us is familiar with Dr. Ben Carson. What he said, he was asked in an interview, he made certain comments concerning Muslim being the president of America. And he made certain statements that that there's a lot of controversy about concerning his statements and what he said. Before I ask you where you're at with that, what your opinion is, what are your views, I want to point you to something real quick. There's a story in The Spectator, a blog story by a Kanta Ahmed. And this person writes in the title of their blog post, a memo for Dr. Ben Carson. Islam and Islamism are conjoined but distinct. And the opening paragraph reads, like so many of the conjoined twins Dr. Ben Carson has skillfully separated, Islam, the monotheism compatible with democracy, and its imposter, Islamism, the totalitarian ideology incompatible with democracy, while intricately conjoined, couldn't be more distinct in personality. I want your opinion on what Dr. Ben Carson said and the controversy of it, but what is your opinion on this blog post that I just noted to you?
He's trying to argue that there's dualism in Islam and that only one side is right and the other is perhaps wrong. They are conjoined, but do you understand why I'm saying this is just
Yes.
another expression of what I said in the beginning of the show? There's always
Yes.
two answers in Islam, a good one and a bad one, and they're both equally real. So, because there are many people who would like to say, well, why don't we just take and get rid of the bad stuff and keep the good stuff and then Islam would be good? Well, here's the problem. If you take a magnet, a bar magnet that has a North Pole and the South Pole, and you say, you know, I want to just cut this in half and throw the North Pole away. What you do is you now have a smaller magnet that's still got a North Pole and a South Pole. You can't get rid of the two poles if it's a magnet. So in the same way, you cannot get rid of the dualism. Now, what we have here is a Muslim who's feeling a little uncomfortable with the entire picture, that is, with the whole Sunnah. He doesn't want to deal with the fact that Islam can actually do what it actually does. So I think he's trying to skirt the issue and work it out so there's a good one and a bad one. But we do know this, we haven't mentioned this, CL, although there are two sides to Islam, the one which we view as more harmful is superior. And the one that we view as good is not as strong. It is not as good. Abrogation, remember?
Yes.
The better verse is the latter verse. So here we have a Muslim who's squirming in his seat and trying to believe that, well, we can just throw away if we separate them out, or at least that's the way I read, that's what I understand from your reading of the article. So that's what I see there. And then we get to Ben Carson, who I love. And why do I love Ben Carson? because he's the strongest man that I've seen recently. How many politicians are going to stand up and say something which they know will be unpopular? Not many. Well, let me tell you something. Ben Carson is a real man. That's my opinion of him. And he also has some knowledge about Islam, which he's willing to talk about in public. So this was, when this happened, in our house, we were walking on air for the morning. I mean, what was your, CL, what was your reaction?
When I heard it, I was shocked because I couldn't believe that, one, that someone would say this in the public and it would be published in the major media, and let alone Ben Carson, someone who is running for president, a major figure, a major candidate in the presidency run right now in the GOP. There's someone like this, at this moment, if you look at the polls, Ben Carson is approaching Trump at a fast rate.
Right.
So this is not a small figure. This is not a small fry. This is a
No.
big guy.
It's a big guy.
Yeah.
And he gambled.
Oh, yes, he
That
did.
is, he didn't have to say those things. And by the way, did you see follow-up interviews with other people? They tried to get him to back off. He's like, no. We have the Sharia is not compatible with the Constitution. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood has been trying to persuade America that that lie is true for years and years. And then Ben Carson walks out and boom, explodes that right in front of you. No, I was, like I say, we literally were walking on air for when we found out about that. I could not believe such blatant truth. Because CL, have you not been suffering under the impact of the lies about Islam under the Obama administration?
Inform us of that.
Well, I mean, what are we told? Look, we're told about Islam the following things: that Islam is a religion of peace, that if you don't like Islam, you're a bigot, you're a hater, you're an Islamophobe, you're racist, and what else do they call it? Anyway, those are the major ones.
Islamophobe.
And that the real Islam is the peaceful Islam, and that the Islamic State is not Islam at all. I mean, that is the narrative that we're fed from the White House about what Islam is. And they're all lies, or at best a half-truth. So when Ben Carson comes out and blows all that away, it's just like, and by the way, this is not the first time that Ben Carson has said something that Obama didn't like. You remember a long time ago, he gave a speech, and Obama was there right behind him, and he criticized him and his programs. You remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. I do remember that.
Ben Carson is the kind of personality I love. Soft-spoken, easygoing, but he doesn't get skittish. He presses right on ahead, and he tells uncomfortable truths and doesn't back down. I love Ben Carson. Seriously. I've given him money, too.
Well, it sounds like, not making an endorsement, but it sounds like the type of person we actually need in leadership in a Western country today.
CL, please, let it happen.
But as me and you both know, it's going to be very hard for Ben Carson to get elected.
I know that. But that doesn't mean I can't love him when I see him.
You can love him. We both know that we already see it now, the reaction in mainstream media. And if he was to ever actually, become a major candidate next year, because we're still pretty early in the race. Next year, 2016, if he's still around and he's a major candidate, we both know what the reaction of mainstream media is going to be.
You know what I love about this, though? The mainstream media has a problem. He's a black man who grows himself up from the ghetto. I mean, like, he's sort of like the American story.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yes. And so there's actually a difficulty they have here. I mean, the New York Times will despise the fact that he tells the truth about the Sharia, but on the other hand, here's a man raised in grinding poverty, didn't have a father, and now becomes one of the leading pediatric neurosurgeons in the world, and now then turns out to be a serious man who will stand up and oppose what the media says. He is politically incorrect. I like it.
Politically
But
incorrect.
I don't mean to get into a love fest about Dr. Ben Carson. I'm sorry there, you got me off on one of my favorite subjects.
No, 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 no. Feel free to voice your opinion. I want to point something else out to you that I saw in this same blog post that I quoted to you earlier. Now, the writer of this blog post also he points out that the U.S. Constitution has no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States, quote unquote. And he cites this as one of the reasons why Dr. Ben Carson was dead wrong in his opinion about what he said. Now, we've already discussed earlier that Islam is not quite what we will call a religion, or not just a religion. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. Because what we're dealing with here is political Islam, which is how the Muslim treats the kafir. So this is not about should you pray 5 times a day. This is not about should you pray to Mecca or Michigan. It's not about any of the religious aspects of Islam. It is about political Islam. And if we can't have political opinions about a presidential candidate, I mean, well, give it up. So no, you're quite right, CL. All we're talking about here, we're not talking about whether the Muslim will go to heaven, go to hell, what are that, any of that. We're not talking about whether he's a good Muslim or a bad Muslim. Does he go to the mosque enough? We don't care. What I care about is the Sharia says that a Muslim is to treat me like political trash, that I'm a third-class citizen. Now, why wouldn't that be of interest to me? If you're running for office and I know that you despise me and my kind, why should I say, that thing about religious tests means that it means just what it means. There's no test. Look, you can run for the office, and if you're elected, you can serve in the office. What we're talking about here is some common sense for the voter. We're talking about awareness in voting.
Yes.
There's no religious test being applied here.
You are definitely correct. But that
By the way, if you found that I was running for office and I was of the KKK, would you not bring that up to say, look, this man's politics stink? And I'm saying to a Muslim, your Sharia stinks when it comes to kafirs.
Yes. But I think this is the big problem, because as the blog post that I read to you pointed out, Islamism, conjoined twins. Islam as a religion and Islam as a political force are conjoined together.
And they cannot be
pointed out,
separated.
they cannot be separated. But this brings a problem to us today, that anytime you bring up or you want to criticize Islam in public concerning its politics, then the religious side will be brought up, and you are a bigot for voicing and saying anything.
By the way, did you know, CL, that I'm one of America's top 10 bigots according to the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Wow.
Why? Because I discuss political Islam.
Wow. You've made a distinguished list.
Actually, the people that were on the list were like Robert Spencer. You would have known everybody on the list. You'd have said, yeah, good company. Seriously. What it does, it gives me enormous street credibility.
Well, yeah, I bet it does. But I mean, have any of the people who made that list actually read the Quran or the Hadith?
Well, the people who made the list, if Spencer's read the Quran and the Hadith, the people who made the list don't know their knee from their elbow. They don't know a Quran from tuna. I mean, they don't. These look. The people who criticize me and you, I don't know you very well, but I bet you've come in for your fair share because you seem to know the truth about Islam. The people who criticize you are the ones who don't know anything about Islam. Those who know anything about Islam go, you're right, CL, you're right.
Yes. But I would answer back, even from a religious standpoint, when we look at purely what you could say maybe religious quotes from the Quran, we still see the mistreatment and the downgrading of the kafir in the Quran. Let me just quote something from the Quran for the audience real quick. Looking at Surah number 8, let's say verse number 12. when it says, this is Allah speaking in the first person, I am with you, so make those who believe stand firm. I will throw fear into the hearts of those who disbelieve, the kuffar, and then smite their nets and smite each of their fingers off. Further down, let's say in verse number 15 of surah number 8, same surah, same passage, we see, O you who believe, when you meet those who disbelieve in battle, turn not your back onto them. Whoever turns their back on the day, whoever on the day turns their back unto them, unless it's a maneuver for battle intended to join a company, he truly has incurred the wrath of Allah, and his habitation shall be hell. Ye Muslims slew them not. This is verse number 17 of the same surah, but it was Allah who slew them. Now, I just read a couple of verses directly from the Quran from Surah 8. And these are religious passages. These are religious statements. This is Allah himself speaking to Muhammad.
Well, he goes further, and I don't remember the exact verse in which he says, the kafir is hated. I mean, you know, so I'm hated and you're hated.
Yes.
And he also says, and this was the strength, the first time I read this, CL, I was like, what? Allah plots and schemes against me and you? Now, come on, if you're the almighty creator of the entire universe, you don't need to plot and scheme. Doesn't that look a little strange that you would have to, if you're God of the universe and you created me, that you have to plot against me? No. So no. But you're right, even the religious part, the kafir, there's no ever sense of sorrow for the kafir. There's no like, you know, you guys got it wrong. Let me show you the right way here, because what you're doing is suffering. That's not the tone at all. If you don't agree with Muhammad, you're evil. You'll be punished. You'll be hated. You'll be plotted against.
Yes. And again, we see these in the Medinan verses. If anybody wants to protest and say, well, in Mecca, blah, 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 blah. No, we're talking about the Medinan verses. In this particular surah, surah number 8 that I just quoted from, is a Medinan verse.
Yes.
So this is the abrogation of what came earlier. Let me quote one more thing for you in the audience. We only have 6 minutes left, so let me get this in real quick. This is from the same surah, surah number 8. This is a Medinan surah. Verse number 39. Fight them until persecution is no more, and all of the religion is for Allah. But if they cease, then lo, Allah is seer of what they do. Now that's a religious statement related to jihad.
The whole earth has to become Allah and Muhammad.
Yes, that's a command.
And
that's
to fight them until that happens. It doesn't mean sit at home and wait about it. Fight them until it happens. So when will jihad cease, CL?
It will not cease until the end of time.
Correct. That is correct. So, and this is important because some people figure that, you know, the whole theme, let's step back and look at what you and I are doing here today. Because if you read the New York Times about any of these things we've discussed, they'll say, oh, this is due to American foreign policy. This was something George Bush did. Or this is whatever. That is, they will point to everything that determines the behavior of a Muslim except the Sunnah and the Quran. The point I'm making here is the conversation we're having, which is highly informed, is very rare because they're always is like, oh, no, it's because we treated them badly. You know, we had the wrong foreign policy. Well, that may be, but that doesn't, the wrong foreign policy did not include jihad, or doesn't end jihad.
I was just thinking while you were saying that, thinking back during the late 1700s with the United States of America, you had in northern Africa a group of Islamic pirates capturing an American ship and taking Americans hostage. This was during the era of the founding fathers. This goes back into early American history. Was their foreign policy provocative of Muslims?
No, they were just they were trying to make money by sailing trade ships on the Mediterranean, and the jihadi pirates attacked them.
Yes, yes, yes.
And by the way, this was a major problem. This is not a minor problem.
Yes, yes. That was not a lone incident that took place.
No, it was continuing and ongoing. And as a matter of fact, it really has a 1,400-year history. We need to understand that in Islam, nothing is new. It's just a repetition, repetition, repetition. And the reason they keep repeating themselves, not only are they commanded to, CL, unfortunately, it keeps working. And the reason it works is not because Islam is so strong, not because the Quran is so good, but because we, the Kafirs, in particular Christians, have decided to be weak and ignorant and instead try to substitute compassion for courage.
Yes, we are commanded by our Lord to be compassionate. We are commanded to love our enemy and pray for them, but we are not commanded to be idiots or
Correct.
to be foolish.
Correct. Don't be an idiot. I mean, that's not a verse in any of the scriptures I've read, but don't be an idiot is good life advice. Don't be a fool.
Yes, don't be a fool. Nothing in our Bible tells us to tolerate someone coming into your country to conquer you and to overthrow your civilization.
There's nothing in the Constitution or the Bible which says you should commit suicide by ignorance and laziness.
No, no, no. I thank you for being on the show, Dr. Warner. I thank you again for being on ABN. This has been a great show and a great conversation, even for myself personally. I enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to see you on the show, on later shows. I'm glad you were here to talk. Again, the topic today was how Islamic doctrine underlines each action. Hopefully this show will be put up on YouTube and other places for you to view and watch later, and to be viewed and watched by others later. Do you have any last words in our last 3 minutes that we have here?
Actually, I do. Let me make it clear why I come on here and discuss things like this with you, CL, and that is because ABN, the Trinity Channel, is one of the few places in the entire universe that this conversation we've had can happen. Most of the media are cowards and ignorant. ABN is one of the few channels which will let honest, open discussion take place about Islam. I mean, what did you just say earlier? There are going to be debates between Muslims and non-Muslims. That is unheard of in our universities. It's unheard of in the media. So I urge people to support ABN because it's one of the few open channels of truth available on the subject of Islam in all the world.
Yes, yes, amen. Please support ABN. If you enjoy ABN, if you learn from ABN, if you want to continue to see ABN and the Trinity Channel and television shows like this, conversations like this, please see within yourself to support ABN monetarily and with your prayers. And again, we thank you today. It's been a great show. We're going to continue to have shows later on tonight, so stay tuned to ABN and the Trinity Channel. I am C.L. Edwards. We've had Dr. Bill Warner, PhD, on the show. Again, we have been discussing how Islamic doctrine underlines each of the actions we see in the media, in the news reported from Muslims and Islamists that we see. The idea that the actions that we see taking place are completely divorced from Islam and they have nothing to do with Islam or the Quran is a ignorant statement from someone who either does not know what they're talking about or has some type of agenda that they're trying to push. That's an evil agenda, I would say myself. Dr. Bill, once again, I thank you again. God bless you, and God bless your work, and I hope to see you later on in the week or sometime later, and we can be on the show again.
Thanks, CL. I've enjoyed myself. I love talking to you.
Love talking to you, too. I love Ben Carson also.
Oh, yes, Ben. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you guys for being out there. Thank you guys for viewing. And again, keep watching ABN, keep watching the show, keep supporting ABN and Trinity Channel. We're going to have more programming for you later on.
Do you have a Samsung Smart TV? Would you like to watch the Trinity Channel on your Samsung Smart TV device? We'd like to share with you an easy way to set up the Trinity Channel and view it on any Samsung Smart TV. If you set the home page on your browser to this address shown on the screen, the Trinity Channel will broadcast live upon entering the browser. It takes about 5 seconds to load the website once entering the browser. If you have any questions about setting up the Trinity Channel on your Samsung Smart TV device, please give ABN a call at 248-416-1300 and we'll be happy to help you.